Welcome to the First Unitarian Universalist congregation of Terre, Haute. This congregation welcomes all people, regardless of their age, religion, race, nationality, ability, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, or anything else that has been used to divide people. We are a group of people with our own opinions, our own ideas, our own dreams. But we share ideals. We share a common belief in a liberal religion. In our discussions, we may disagree with each other, but we must always remember that what unites us is stronger than what separates us. We must always end the service aware of the love that we have for each other.
Hello, Terre, Haute. It's good to be with you today, even though I'm not there in person. I'm going to pretend I can see you sitting in front of me. And hopefully one of these days I'll be back over there in person. But it's good to be with you, and I hope this worship service is meaningful to you and to all those who view it later. And be well, stay safe, and resist. Blessed be. Forgive us, for we know not what we have done. History is one of the most important subjects we can ever study, because it is our yesterdays that allows us to fashion dreams rather than nightmares for tomorrow. Were you taught the history of our nation in your school when you were growing up? Did you read about the Tulsa Massacre of blacks in the 1920s? And now forensic scientists are digging up what appears to be a mass grave in Tulsa, revealing a history that has been hidden for decades and decades and decades. How much of our history is not given to us? Doris Lessing wrote, "Children should be taught about history not as is usually the case now, that this is a record of long past events which one ought to know about for some reason or another, but that this is a story from which one may learn not only what has happened, but what may and probably will happen again." Literature and history, these two great branches of human learning, records of human behavior, human thought, are less and less valued by the young and by educators too. Yet from them one may learn how to be a citizen and a human being. We may learn how to look at ourselves and at the society in which we live, in that calm, cool, critical, and skeptical way which is the only possible stance for a civilized human being. Or so have said all the philosophers and the sages. But all the pressures go the other way, towards learning what is immediately useful, what is functional. More and more, the demand is for people to be educated to function in an almost certainly temporary stage of technology. End quote. They are educated for the short term, she says. That's from an essay entitled "Prisons We Choose to Live In." "The past is never dead," said William Faulkner. "It is not even the past. But it may be hidden," I would add. And a poem written by a friend of mine in Florida, musician and songwriter Grant Peoples. "There are not two sides to this story. it's a message for nationalists. Let us be clear, there are not two sides to every story. This is a false adage intended to create a fake narrative, a phony inference, implying that some sort of righteous equilibrium is in play. No, sometimes it's just a story. Like today, a story with singular but universal spiritual reveal, such as when Odysseus trumped home from Troy. And whereas his story is the story of the Trojan War, your story, titled by the soul you see in your mirror, is in fact the story of America's war against its own sins and vulgarity. Genocide and thievery, slavery, greed, and hypocrisy. You do not exist outside this context. Binge as you wish in the land of the lotus eaters, on the psychotropics and sugar fats, the Adderall and alcohol, and the psychedelic serum of digital media and hero worship. But this ship is still coming home. And when it does, that mirror of yours will shatter, and the broken pieces of you shall be all of you that history sees. History is important. We need to know our history. We need to deal with our history. We need to live our history in our bones, in the marrow of our bones. This week marks the 75th anniversary of the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. There are a lot of arguments about whether or not it was justified. I personally don't think it was, and I may share some of my reasons for that before we're done. But first, I want to share with you another poem written by Cookie Lynch, one of the founding members of the Bloomington Unitarian Universalist Church, a longtime friend with whom I had great disagreements at times, but whom expressed the greatest expression that defines us as Unitarian Universalists that I know, when in the midst of one of our very rather at least warmed over arguments, she's finally stopped and said to me, well, you and I both know that good friends can disagree. And I want to remind you of that. As Unitarian Universalists, good friends can disagree. And I honor that for Cookie Lynch. She wrote this poem on August 5th in 2005, which would have been well, you figure it out. And it was on the anniversary of Hiroshima. It's entitled Apologia. My tears had all been shed. Enola Gay's cargo of withering death could not speak to me. I had cried for my young soldier husband, trapped in the Christmas snows of the Bulge, for the lads on the Normandy beaches, hurled like pebbles against the cliff-top cannon. I wept for the racked bodies of the Baton's March, for sailors incinerated in the pearl of the Pacific, for my captain father whose ship was sunk off of Algiers. It is 1945. Whatever it takes, it must end. Ye gods of war, 400,000 Americans slain is enough. Do the Japanese wives and mothers weep for our dead? We know not what we do, but we are ready. We wives and mothers accept the unacceptable. Only later, in the fullness of time, came the hot tears, came the guilt, came the national shame. Only later. War, continual war, this unending economy of war under which we live and strive as a nation and thrive as a nation for more than 6 decades now, 7 decades. Doris Lessing, in her book, The Colonized Planet 5, Shikasta, which I highly recommend, she says, war strengthened the position of the armament industries, to a point that these industries dominated the economies and therefore the governments of all participating nations. War barbarized and lowered the already low level of accepted conduct. That's what war does for us. That's what war does for us. This past week I happened to turn on C-SPAN and got in on a congressional hearing, Ways and Means, I believe it was, and they had an official from Lockheed Martin there, and they had the Air Force person in charge of that contract with Lockheed Martin to build the F-35. I heard one Republican congressman introduce or address the Lockheed Martin person and the Air Force witness with this statement, said, "America demands that we dominate the skies of the globe. Anywhere on the globe, we dominate the skies." And he asked the question, does the F-35 give us that domination of the skies anywhere on the globe? Of course, the answer they gave was yes, it does. Even though it's a dangerous airplane that many pilots have said is dangerous, and many programs in it have failed. And the interesting thing was, the cost of the F-35, they promised they were trying their best to get it down. And they said, we hope to be able to get it down to the cost of $25,000 an hour to fly. They had no idea when they were going to die. They didn't say how much it costs now. They just said, we hope to get it down to $25,000 an hour to fly. How many teachers would that pay? How many houses can we build at $25,000 an hour? How many people can we feed at $25,000 an hour? And we haven't even gotten down that yet with the F-35. We haven't gotten down that far. And what kind of arrogance is it for any person in any nation to say, we demand the dominance of the skies around the globe? What kind of arrogance does that take? Who do we think we are? Forgive us, for we know not what we have done, and we know not what we are doing. It's tough preaching these days. It's difficult. I shared with a tech friend of mine running the camera for me today that I always dreamed of being a stand-up comic. Person, man, woman, camera, TV. That's pretty funny. I hope it's not copyrighted yet, but it's pretty funny. And if you haven't heard it, Google it. Watch it. Person, woman, man, camera, TV. If you did it in order, you get extra points. So I got extra points this morning. That's about all the humor I can handle today, to be honest with you, because I also on C-SPAN watched the gathering in Atlanta, Georgia, of evangelicals for Trump. And I believe his name was Reverend Lee. I had to go back and look, but you can find it. Look up Evangelicals for Trump rally, and you'll find him. And he claimed that his forefathers, there has always been a man preacher in Atlanta, Georgia, for something like 6, 7, or 8 generations. Way back there, there's been a Lee preacher. I think his name was Lee. And he's founded a big mega church down there called the Redeemer Church. And he bragged about the fact that the president has removed the Johnson rule so that churches can now tell preachers can tell their members who to vote for without penalty. I would never do that. I respect my members better than that. I respect Unitarian Universalists to know who to vote for. I don't have to tell them because I think they're thinking, conscious people. But this man went on and on about the first time that he had met the man in the White House and found out that he attended Norman Vincent Peale's church. If you remember Norman Vincent Peale, you're almost as old as I am. But he said, I knew he was a godly man because he loved his church so much. Here is an evangelical preacher bragging about a godly man who cheated on his first wife with his second wife with his third wife with a film star, a godly man who loves Jesus. And I don't, he may love Jesus. I'm not going to judge him. I'm just saying for an evangelical minister to say that in 2020 is an absurdity. It ignores the history. It ignores what is past. And in fact grabs on to that southern so-called culture of slavery that his forefathers preached to protect. That's what our history is. As you may surely have noticed, I've decided that my clerical vestments, until further notice, when George Floyd died from murder, I decided I will wear this shirt every time I preach until further notice, because Black Lives Matter. The other thing that's on my mind these days is this administration's rush to kill. We just went through 3 executions at Terre, Haute. I was there for every one, within the proximity, as close as I could get. I've also learned that the man that I have served as spiritual advisor to for more than a decade is going to be in the next round of executions, even though the victim's family has forgiven him and do not want him executed. Even though they have spent thousands of dollars helping him live through suicide attempts simply so they could take him out of a solitary cell someday, strap him onto a cross-shaped gurney, and kill him. So we are living in difficult times. Forgive us, for we know not what we have done. We know not what we are doing. This virus, this pandemic that has separated us all from physical contact, but it will not separate us from spiritual contact, from being a community. And I trust that you are staying in touch with your community. I trust that you are supporting this community, because there will be another side to this pandemic. It will not last forever. There will be others, but this one will not last forever. It may not disappear immediately, but sooner or later, Mr. Trump will be right. It will go away, and we will have others to deal with. I went back and looked at Albert Camus' book, The Plague. And Dr. Rieu, in that book, who is actually the alter ego of Camus and talks Camus' philosophy and theology throughout the book. And in talking about this plague, this virus, he says, there's one thing I must tell you. There's no question of heroism in all of this. It's a matter of common decency. That's an idea which may make some people smile. But the only means of righting a plague is common decency. It is common decency to wear a mask. Our nation has somehow been transformed. And it's been slow in coming. It's been this kind of slow transformation, sort of like Kafka's, where the guy metamorphoses, turns into an insect. And we've been metamorphosizing for decades now. And we have changed. And we've forgotten that it's not me go, it's not ego, it's we go. We go together. The American community needs to come together. We need to understand that this virus, this pandemic, is showing us just how common decency is the only thing that can make a community work. And so people get so upset. I don't want that. You're taking my rights away to wear a mask. absurd because everything is me-centered instead of we-centered. We are a community. This nation has come together in times past, sometimes in good ways and sometimes in bad ways, but we have come together at times and expressed the common decency of which Camus speaks, the common decency that says this world is a gift to us. And how do we get it back? Well, I'll tell you, I'm not sure, really. My mom used to collect gold bond stamps, and S&H green stamps, I think they were called. She was a Stanley Home Products dealer, and so she got a lot of stamps. And every once in a while, she'd get all her stamp books out. There'd be a stack of them. And usually it was around Christmas time. And she would take us to the catalog that Gold Bond put out, that S&H get out. And she says, we're going to redeem these stamps. And we'll get these things for them. We're going to redeem their value. Well, that preacher in Atlanta called his church the Redeemer Church. What is he redeeming? A culture of racism. A culture of a minister who stands up and says that the Democrats are all communist. And in fact, he probably wouldn't know a communist when he saw one. What is he redeeming? Redemption is an important concept in our faith. We need to redeem human value. We need to redeem it. Common decency. We need to redeem common decency. What is our value? Is it simply money? Is it simply me and my little family? Or are we Homo sapien, one family, one human race? We need to find a way to redeem that. And, you know, I guess one of the ways I have to say, that for me, one of the ways to redeem human decency for each one of us, there's no song I learned as a child, gospel song. Count your blessings, count them every day. You know, count your blessings. Count your blessings. Now it goes on to say, see what God has done. I'm not sure about that. But I would say count your blessings, see what love has done. See what love has done for you. Count your blessings. Count them every day. And the fact is, we can get real excited and upset about microaggressions, and I want to pay attention to those kind of things. I'm trying to learn different pronouns. I'm 71 years old and been using he and she for years, and I'm going to try to do better. But I tell you, one of the things about privilege is the ability to focus on microaggressions and ignore macroaggressions. Aggression carries intent, so let's be gentle with each other. Let's be gentle. Mistakes are mistakes. Let's call ourselves on it. Let's change. Let's find ways to adopt this new vocabulary of our young people. But let us not take our eyes off the macroaggressions of somewhere around 300 or so multi-billionaires on this globe and tens of thousands of children dying of hunger-related diseases every 24 hours. That's a macroaggression. It's a macroaggression when a policeman kneels on a black man's throat for 8 minutes while being called to quit by standers-by and his own fellow officers. That's a macroaggression, and it's a macroaggression when the Department of Justice saves the friends of the president and executes the poor. Those are macroaggressions. And I am calling all of us to be gentle with one another, to begin to say, it's not just my rights, it's not just my pain, it is our rights. It is our community. It is we go together or we don't go at all. Jorge Borges, father of the modern short story, and among my top 3 authors that I love to read, says he understood that the task of molding the incoherent and dizzying stuff that dreams are made of is the most difficult work a person can undertake, even if one fathoms all the enigmas of the higher and lower spheres, much more difficult than weaving a rope of sand or minting coins of the faceless wind. Much more difficult than weaving a rope of sand or minting coins of the faceless wind is molding that incoherent and dizzying stuff of dreams. But the only way it can be done, and the only way we can create dreams, like the one of Martin Luther King or John Lewis, or many others before us, is to know where we have been. Because our tomorrows arise out of the amniotic fluid of our yesterdays. That's where it all comes from. Then Borges says, I reflected that all things happen to oneself and happen precisely now. Century follows century, yet events occur only in the present. What is occurring in your present today? How much do you know of your history today? How much can you draw from yesterday to have new dreams for tomorrow? We need a new dream as a community. We need a new dream as a nation. We need a new dream as a human family. A dream that draws a circle big enough to include all of us, even those who we think we hate. Those are the dreams that I seek. Those are the dreams that when they come, I awaken with a new sense of possibility for my children and my grandchildren and yours. Those are the dreams that allow us to say, yes, Hiroshima and Nagasaki were tragic events. The war was finished. Japan couldn't invade anybody anymore. We could have just come home. The war in Europe was finished, but the last bombing run of my friend Howard Zinn, historian and bombardier, was to Royan, a small village in France. The German soldiers had already moved out to the countryside, were garrisoned there. There was no fighting going on. And Howard says they flew over Royan and dropped these bombs. And he realized later that the only reason they did it, it was to test a new weapon. It was a napalm bomb that killed hundreds of the little village in Royan. And the only purpose was to test a weapon for the next war. Yes, that is our history. No, it does not have to be our tomorrow. I invite you to reflect on such things, to understand that we can find and we can be decent people. We can restore common decency, and that is the answer to the pandemic. Not only the pandemic of COVID, but the pandemic of fear, of racism, of war. Recovering common decency. It's been an honor to speak with you today. Blessed be. Go and walk in peace. Amen.